Hello, all. Welcome back to our fifth episode of Data Pancakes. So, in this journey, we have taken you through a lot of topics. We have started with what's a data mesh concept. Next, we went into what's a data domain. We defined what's a data product. In a previous episode, we worked through different personas in a particular data management scenario. So, going back to our example which we had, we defined our fictitious airline company, which we have named as Oceanic Airlines. Within Oceanic Airlines, we kind of picked up two different domains. One was the air flight operations management, and the second one was a baggage handling. So, as you can see in the slide, we defined what were the different products and where do they play a role, right? So we talked about domains, we talked about a domain model, we talked about data domains, and we talked about application domains. We also briefly worked on to say like which products do we map into these logical structures. So we saw that Fabric was mapped into the data domain piece. We had Azure on-premises or other clouds which are mapped into your application domain, where you could have, for instance, your relational systems or applications which are generating the data. That's under the application domain. And of course, you had the domain model, and that's the place where we said Purview would play a role, because that's an area where you would define your data model. So, going from there into the next piece, we also walked through the different roles or the different personas. In the previous episode, as you can see in this slide, we walked through the different roles which are available and what do they mean. The most important piece which we discussed in the last episode was how do we kind of map these business roles into technical roles in Microsoft Fabric. That's where we actually concluded the episode and said we would kind of continue during this episode to map the same business roles which we had in the previous episode into Purview. So how does this actually map into roles within Purview? For that, I would like to pass it over to Pete Hein.
Thank you, Sarat. So before we start studying Purview and we will even look at it and demonstrate it, let me quickly guide you through. So here on the screen you see a breakdown of the Purview service. So at the highest level, Purview is managed as a software, so at tenant level. And there we typically see internal roles like a Purview administrator. So the Purview administrator is the person, the role responsible for setting up the business domains as well the main, so the high level collection structure. Next you see there's a business domain here. And this is really a logical layer. So it describes the concepts, the business terms, the business domain itself, still at a contextual level. So it describes the problem space, not the solution space where we see actually applications within. On this level, we have a business domain admin. So that's a delegate role from that Purview administrator. So that person then can, for a particular business domain, add new roles. There will be as well a business domain reader, so someone who's able to read all of that information. There will be a data steward, so someone able to edit essential information, so for instance adding new business terms to the glossary. And there will be as well a data product owner role. The data product here, it's important and essential to emphasize this is seen as a logical entity. So it's a bit unlike how data mesh describes this. It's not a physical representation of a data set or a container that resides somewhere in an application or in a data platform. No, we see this as a logical entity. And hence think about this as a bundle or a kit. So you could link this to multiple data assets. So it could be even a combination of different data sets. Then you describe on that next layer. So that's the physical layer where we see collections. So that's the last piece you see here. So at the bottom we see collections. So when we start scanning and cataloging our technical systems or applications and source systems as well Microsoft Fabric in that respect, we will store all of the technical metadata into here collections. So there you see data sources, applications, platforms. The scanning there is also essential. Also data quality. So the profiling will be done on that level, and we might establish workflows there as well. On this level, we also have roles within Purview. So there is a collection administrator, so someone responsible for adding additional people to a collection. There will be data curators, so people who could describe technical data sources, so they could describe column names with technical descriptions, for instance, or add manually classifications on that level. There's a role called a data source administrator, so someone who could trigger the scanning, because that person might be in charge and in control, because that might be also the person owning and controlling the operational system, so hence it would like to be in control of when the scanning actually runs on that system. So this is high level how Purview falls down into different layers. And then next, here on this slide, and so that you should also help me and challenge me maybe a bit on this, is instead of building up the personas and linking and mapping them to the different roles as you saw in Purview, we already did that mapping up front. So the Purview administrator, for instance, so that's the role we have set in Purview, in my view, could be best linked to the IT domain owner, or it could be the head of data governance, or I don't know, maybe there's an head of data that manages both the Purview environment as well the Microsoft Fabric environment. So in that case, it would hold two different roles. So it will be the Purview administrator, at the same time it will be the Fabric administrator.
Question, Peter. In the previous episode, we looked at how a Fabric administrator was mapped into an IT domain lead or a business domain lead. So in this perspective, we also talked about Purview admin, which is kind of the biggest role which you can have inside Purview. So from your perspective, is it the same IT domain lead and business domain leads who share responsibilities also on the Purview side, or would they be disjoint? Could you shed some light on this?
Yeah, excellent question. And this comes with lots of nuances and also very much depends on how you are internally organized. So some organizations, they have established a larger data team that looks over data governance as well, data engineering, so building data products, doing data ingestion, data development. In other examples or scenarios, I see this is split apart into two different teams. So one team dedicatedly looking over data governance, another team more a clear focus on data engineering. So therefore then there will be two different roles, personas in that respect. So again, it very much depends on how you are organized and how these personas will look internally, and then how this will map and relate to the roles we provide you from Microsoft Purview and Microsoft Fabric. So moving forward. So after establishing a business domain, there will be a business domain administrator. So the way I see this could be usually the business owner or the domain owner, so or a manager of that business team. So taking responsibility for all of the different business activities employed in that particular business domain. But again, this very much depends. So in some cases, so ideally I would say, well, a team is more horizontal, so takes ownership over their applications, technical systems, as well the ingestion of data into a data platform, doing data development, building data products, and data consumption. So if so, it would be one person being in the lead and acting as a business domain administrator. But in other cases, sometimes I see is where one team takes ownership over the technical applications and the operational systems, and maybe another team does all the ingestion of data and creation of data products. So if you facilitate a bit more from a central perspective, then it could fall apart in, again, different business domains with different roles. So important to keep that in mind.
Another question, Pitain. We had the concept of domains in Microsoft Fabric, and within domains, we had domain administrators. In this scenario with Purview, we do see that there is a business domain administrator. Could you share some differences between what is a business domain administrator role as compared to a domain administrator role within Microsoft Fabric?
Yes, again, excellent question. So ideally, I would advocate for nice alignment where the business domain follows the data domains. But it could be also very well different where like I explained, you have other teams working on data, ingesting data, building data products. You could also opt for a more fine-grained model even in that respect. So where you see the business domain as a larger construct overseeing the whole business, describing all context, but reworking data structures and modeling data into data products, maybe that part is delegated to other teams within that larger business domain. So then, yeah, yet you will have more data domains then, and yeah, as well domain administrators in Fabric, so Microsoft Fabric. So those roles could all be aligned, but yeah, it could also be unlike that. So again, it very much depends, and it comes with lots of nuances. So it's a hard exercise, I must admit, for all organizations, how to do this really well.
A follow-up question on the previous one. We talked about domain definitions inside Fabric, and now we have domains within Purview. Is there a soft recommendation which we could provide that these domain definitions need to be the same? Or are there scenarios where you could define a business domain in Purview which could have child domains, for instance, within Fabric? Could you shed some light on this?
Yeah, ideally these domains are nicely aligned. So that's my recommendation. So strive for nice alignment. However, what you will find in practice, it won't be always the case, because there might be applications maybe shared and used by different business domains or other teams. So yeah, then that alignment won't look that nice. And I think this is also more an enterprise architecture consideration. So looking forward, how would you like to remodel your and manage your entire end-to-end landscape? So including applications as well, yeah, managing all of your data. So that's, I think, more a longer-term strategic choice as also as an organization you should make. And then next you see here I detailed out some other roles. So like explained before, so there's this business domain reader, so allowing users to have read-only access to all business related information in Purview. So this could be a generic business user, for instance. There's this data steward role, which I feel nicely maps to the persona of a data steward you might have internally. And there's as well in Purview a data product owner, and this again yet could be mapped to a data product owner persona you have established yourself. Again, this comes with nuances. Maybe the data steward is also the data product owner. So that could also be very well the case. Or the data product owner also helps and supports the data steward very much. So the data product owner persona then also has the role of data steward within Microsoft Purview. So again, yeah, you need to lay out your own internal framework, so data governance framework, describe well all of the different personas, and see how these different personas would map to the different roles you have in services like Microsoft Fabric and Microsoft Purview.
Question, Vitai. So we talked about the business domain, and we have the concept of domains within Fabric. And there's a lot of overlap in the roles, right? Although they are on the Fabric side as well as on the Purview side. So what's your view? Do we have like these roles which sit in Purview, which have very close synergy with the teams and the role definitions within Fabric? How critical is that these two teams, although they are separate roles in separate products, they are the same people? Can you shed some light in that space?
Yeah, that synergy is essential in my view. So yeah, if you don't have that great alignment, there will be typically lots of handovers between maybe people who do the work within an environment like Microsoft Fabric, so building data products, versus maybe another person who would describe that data product then. So strive for good alignment where usually the people developing, building data products jointly work with someone who is the data product owner in that respect. So there could be very good alignment.
Looking at this picture, we see that you have these blue boxes, which mostly represent business, And you have those purple boxes, which are collection administrators, and below, which mostly represents, from my perspective, IT persona. Could you share a bit of light on that space? For me, it sounds like the blue boxes are logical layers, and the purple boxes are mostly in the physical layer. Can you share some information on that space?
Yeah, the logical layer is really the business layer. So there we capture the semantics, the contextual information about that domain. So we describe that domain, we give it context using business terms. We define data products, yet which are again, like I said, logical entities. So that's our logical layer. I think that layer mostly aligns typically with people who work more within the business itself. So they know the business's processes extremely well. They know the context, understand that context of the business. They set the requirements likely for that business domain. So usually those are the people operating on that upper layer. At the bottom, so that's more the physical layer. So that's where we see more the real engineers working within. So the collection administrator, it's more a technical role. So someone who's responsible for managing the technical metadata, describing physical systems, applications, as well the data we have worked upon in an environment like Microsoft Fabric. So that could be a DevOps engineer or someone from IT or the platform engineer of that respective data domain we discussed. One level below, you see there's a data curator role. This, in my view, maps to personas like an application owner or a data engineer, but it could be as well the data steward. So if the data steward is a bit more technical, maybe, and that's sometimes what I see at organizations, and that data steward also describes technical tables and labels those or adds definitions or classifications even on that level. That persona could be very well mapped to the role of data curator within Microsoft Purview. And next, well, the data product owner could also be very well a data curator. So supporting indeed the management of that technical metadata. And then lastly, there are other roles. And this is not the full list, but the most important roles. So there's a data reader, so someone who has read-only access to the technical metadata. So typically there I see business users, or again, yet these could be data stewards if they have a more, I think, soft role or are more aligned to the business. Still, they could read the technical metadata. Or yeah, at last, well, there's a data source administrator. So that's usually the person responsible for managing that application. So that could be an application owner, for instance, if you have defined that in your framework with personas. So this summarizes it all. What we would like to do next, so I'll pass it over to you, Surat. We will do a quick tour again in Microsoft Fabric. So we do a recap. So what we have there, so demonstrate quickly the domains and the workspaces we have created before. And then next we switch over to Purview and really demonstrate the new version, how actually all of this will look like.
Yeah, so thank you, Bidan. As you can see here from the previous episode, we had defined domains. So we are in the domains page in the admin portal where you have we have air flights operations management. We have the baggage handling management, which is my second domain. We have added two more domains: facilities management and airport and lounges management. So now going back to my workspaces, as you can see, I have, for instance, my AOM, that's my air flight operations management. Arrivals, I'm from the arrivals team, and I belong to a team which is team one. So if I get into my workspace, what I could see here is basically I have my bronze layer, silver layer, and gold layer. So it's a medallion architecture, which we will talk about in our later episodes. But for now, just to show you that we have different lake houses and we have populated the data, we have created a separate lake house for this demo, which is actually in the data products folder. So we have the concepts of folders within Fabric. And if you go into a data products, you can see that there's a dedicated lakehouse which has been created for air ops. So that's a particular data set. So if I actually go into my air ops lakehouse, you can see that I have four different tables in here. So one is an aircraft, second one is a crew, third one is a flight, and the fourth one is passengers. So it's basically one fact, which is a flights table, and we have three other dimensions in there. The next piece is about how Purview is going to scan this and how it's going to be represented within Microsoft Purview. For that, I would like to pass it over to Pete Hine.
Thanks a lot for passing it back to me. So what we see here on the screen is the newly released Purview version. So this new version went generally available for public preview on the 8th of April. But depending on your roles, so whether you're an administrator or just a reader, the interface here might show more or less. So I'm here the Purview administrator, so I have all the options here enabled, accessible. So one of the biggest changes here is the new business catalog. So if we open the business catalog, here we see the number of sources, the assets, the glossary terms. But more importantly, here we see the business domains. So these are the business domains which we had touched upon before. So air flight, operations management, airport and lounges management. And this touches upon that upper layer we discussed before. So it's the logical layer in which we capture the business context. Here on this layer or level, we describe the data products, the domain itself, the business terms, and how these business terms would relate to these different data products. If I click on one of these business domains, I could see more information here. So I see the owner, the detailed description of this domain. I see indeed there's one data product developed within here. There are business terms, objective key results as part of your overarching data strategy, for instance. And here, lastly, we see the different roles. So here's the business domain owner. For instance, we could set the domain readers, data product owners, data stewards. So this all aligns with the roles we discussed before. But there's much more. So here we see the data products, for instance, and I could even drill down further. So here the AirOps Insight data product, which also Sarat demonstrated before. Here we see a detailed description. I've added some additional information about use cases. I could set the update frequency. And lastly, I could link it to a real physical data asset. So here the AirOps data set. So the lakehouse entity that sits in my Fabric workspace, for instance. So I could draw a relationship here from this logical entity all the way down to a physical data asset. Data quality, again, yet another experience. So package handling management, for instance, again, I see different data products. I could drill down and then see the actual asset. Click once more, and here I could see an overview. So I see the score, the trend over time, and all of the different active rules. So I could look at these, and either I use Copilot here for suggesting a new rule, or I would click and then build a new rule myself, and I could choose from a long list of options, like you see here. So this is all the functionality that sits on that upper layer, so the logical layer. There's also another experience. So if we go back to the first screen and we go to the data map, here we would see an overview of all of the technical assets. So the physical layer we touched upon before. Again, there are domains, but these are technical domains. And here I have decided for different technical domains. So I've created a technical domain for air flight operations management, so that domain, and the package handling domain, so another one. Within, we see an application domain and a data domain. And also on this level, so here I could set roles, but be cautious, these roles align to that physical layer. So a domain admin managing all of the items on this physical layer. A collection admin then someone responsible for managing a collection. Same for data sources and data curators. The last thing I would like to show here is these different data sources. So here you see another overview, and let me zoom in a bit. So here you see the root where all the domains sit, and I've decided for connecting Fabric to this root layer. And why? Because Fabric is offered as a SaaS single instance service. It's being shared between all teams, so therefore I linked it to this root domain. I've created also a collection for air flight operations and baggage handling. And then below we see the application domain. And this maps, like you saw in the beginning, to the applications we discussed earlier. So within the application domain. What I've also done, so I've mapped metadata from Fabric, so the workspace metadata, from the air flights operations domain into the data domain. So if I would zoom into this one, I would see all the assets of this domain. So all the items I see here, so the artifacts, also again, Sarat demonstrated before, those are scanned and are mapped. So the workspace of this particular domain is mapped to the data domain of this particular domain then. Why would we do such a breakdown and structure these domains accordingly? Because I might, for instance, set different roles on these different collections. So maybe there are different members from my team managing the application domain. It could be very well that there are different members from my domain managing the data domain, so working within the workspaces within Microsoft Fabric. So therefore, I've decided for this breakdown. So this ends the short demonstration of the new Microsoft Purview version. So Sarat, let's go back to you for one final recap.
Thank you, Pete. So if you look at this picture, zooming out on where we started from, right? We had two different business domains within our fictitious oceanic airline companies. We had the air flight operations management, which was one of my business domains, and baggage handling management, which was a second domain. Within this domain, we discussed on source data coming in. So source data being coming in from applications, which are creating them, and that's where we define them as the application domain. Next, we saw within Microsoft Fabric how did we create medallion architecture and how that data was being modeled and massaged for data use and consumption. And that's where Microsoft Fabric sits. It sits in the data domain. Next, we saw on how two different domains were defined. And as you can see in this picture, there will be cross collaboration between different domains to really start creating business value. In the next slide, Pete Hine is going to show you on what we saw in this picture, how was that mapped into Purview in the demo. That's something which will conclude our current episode. Pete Hine, over to you.
Thanks for passing it back to me, Sarat. So what I would like to do finally is draw conclusions and really try to connect the dots here. So for that, let me bring up another slide, which you see here on the screen. So this slide reflects the two domains we have used and discussed before. So air flight operations management and the baggage handling domain. So what we expect ideally are horizontal teams taking ownership over the applications, as well ingesting data, building data products, doing the integration, data development, and also distributing data across, so sharing data between different domains. Each business domain is expected to take ownership over their operational systems, so applications. And that represents an application domain in the solution space, like you see here also on the screen. And the data domain, as we demonstrated before, is where we use Microsoft Fabric for. So within, we created domains. Those domains align to the business domains. We could argue, well, these are data domains then. And then within these domains, we have workspaces. So a boundary where team members will work within managing their artifacts, in which we create data products, for instance. So the data product data, I must be precise here. Then at the top, we have our end-to-end data governance solution. So Microsoft Purview overseeing everything, so end-to-end. There, within, we have two logical layers. So we have the logical layer describing the business context. So there we see business domains. And what we have done, we have created nice alignment. So I've established a business domain within Microsoft Purview and aligned this also to the business domains we see within the solution space, so below. So there's yet another air flight operations management domain and a baggage handling management domain. But in each of these business domains, we will see the contextual information. So we will see the business terms as well as the data products. So the logical entities we discussed and also demonstrated before. One level below, we see collections. So this is about describing and managing the physical architecture, so the physical layer. So the solution architecture you see below. And there we decided for an individual application domain and a data domain for each of these business domains. And we did some alignment there. So we started scanning the operational systems from that application domain, so that collection we created. And we did something similarly for the data domain. So I demonstrated, you saw all of the artifacts from that workspace, from that particular business domain, and that metadata sits in a data domain. So this brings me to the end. I hope you enjoyed. And for the next episode, I would like to pass it back to you, Surat. So one more time, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pitain. To our viewers, hope you guys enjoyed our current episode. In this episode, we walked through all the different personas. We mapped it into Purview. We showed how Purview could scan Fabric and how everything comes together into one single piece. In our next episode, we are going to dive a bit more deeper into a practical scenario. We are going to define an OKR for our fixtures domain, which is the air flights operations management. We're going to see how that's really used in practice. How could health score help in relying on data and creating data which is of high quality and for critical reporting purposes? So stay tuned, and thanks a lot for watching this episode.